Hey, what is going on, everybody? Bauer Brown here. Welcome back to the channel, guys, and welcome to video number 3 in the Blender for Beginners tutorial series. Alrighty, so judging by the last two videos, you should be pretty well up to speed with, moving objects around, adding objects, deleting objects, rotating, scaling, making minor transformations like that. Just kind of, familiar with the object itself. Selections, you should be able to make multiple types of selections. You should be familiar with, faces and edges and vertexes, and, you should know what a polygon is. And I think today we'll go over normals. We'll get you familiar with, maybe that's for next lesson. We'll do normals. N-gons, we'll go over that really quickly. And the last few remaining things in the toolbar, we covered all the basic stuff up in this toolbar, right? So we're going to go over just a few more things, and we're good to go. All right, so I'm going to move myself over to the modeling screen. Now, I did tell you at one point that it doesn't make a huge difference what screen you're in, and I stand by that. It for the most part, does not. Now, the major difference between layout and modeling is in modeling, there's just a little bit more real estate. You got little bit more screen space because you're missing that play bar down bottom, right? And the same goes for the rest of the screens. I'll tell you what screen you need to be in if you need to be in a specific screen. For right now, modeling or layout will work just fine. You don't have to, worry about if you're in the right screen or not. Okay, so I showed you how to get into selection mode. I'm in edit mode right now, and you can tab into edit mode. Up top here, where you had your vertex, your edge, and your face. 1, 2, and 3 on your number keys will get you into those different modes. You can select more than one mode. So using, holding your shift button, you can have all three of these selected if you want to, or, just two of them. Whether you knew that or not, you can have them all selected. Sometimes it comes in handy, so you may want to, play around with that a little bit. Now you can see I got a few different colors going on my screen here. I've been playing around with my Blender lately. And you can go into, if you want to know how I did this, you go up to edit, preferences. For some reason, mine's been taking an extra second or two to do things. Not sure what's going on. But if you go up to themes, you can change just about everything. You can change your selection colors, your menu colors. Sky's the limit, man. You can change literally everything. At one point, I got a little carried away and I actually had to reset it because it looked kind of hideous. Interesting, but not quite what I was going for. All right. So like I said, you can make more than one selection up here, which comes in very handy. The other thing I want to go over, I'm going to get rid of this cube. Now you got to watch. One of the things that I've been doing when I've been deleting objects, and I have a bad habit of doing this, so try not to follow my lead on this. What I've been doing is like selecting all the faces and just hitting delete faces. Right, delete faces, but you can see that cube didn't actually go away. I'm sure if I go into one of the modes, there's probably remnants of that hanging out somewhere. So if you're going to delete a whole object, it's probably better to just do it right up there in your outliner and then just, add a new object because it doesn't quite go away. There's probably some piece of that hanging out somewhere. All right, so I got this plane started up and I'm just going to scale that up a little bit. All right, and I'm going to do the same thing I did last time. I'm going to right-click, hit S. Why that shade smooth? I don't want to do that. I was supposed to be subdivide. Let's Control Z and get me out of there. So I need to be in edit mode to be able to subdivide. Right-click, subdivide. There we go. So I'm going to open up my little panel down here, and I'm going to jack that up to 10. All right, so this is basically the same thing I did last time. I just want to go over a few of these selection modes here. Now, I know we went over everything for holding shift. I mean, you got your individual selections. Let me go into face mode here, right? And then holding shift is multiple selections. Control will select from one end to the other. And then there's yet another one that I want to go over with you. And if it's Alt, if you hit Alt, now I use this mostly for lines, for edges. Now you can see when I select it that it's only selecting that single edge, right? So this is the same thing as faces where you hold shift and you can do multiples, or control will get you, from one end to the other. But if you hold Alt, like I'm holding that now and select the line, it will select the entire line all the way across as long as it's not uninterrupted. Now, I'm not sure of the exact rules or mechanics behind this, but I know with each of these faces, it needs to just be a normal quad, right? A normal unbroken. And when I say quad, just a four-sided shape, right? So you have tris, which are triangles, basically a form of a triangle, has three sides, quads, which is a four-sided object. And then you get up into an n-gon, which is a shape with more than four sides to it. All right. So if this has any one of these has more than four sides, it won't work. So if it's interrupted in any way, it needs to be, you know, just simple quads. So you can see how if I press Alt, it'll pick from, oops. Well, it does work on faces too. So, and faces are a little bit weird. So if I want to pick the whole line up and down, I got to hover near a vertical line or near a horizontal line. See, that horizontal line will get me all the up and downs. If I want to pick everything going all the way across, I got to hover near a vertical line, and that'll pick everything going horizontally. A little weird, I know, but I guess it kind of makes sense because this way you're in the middle of the line. See how that is right there? Oops, I'm pressing Control. Let me go back into Alt. So yeah, here you're in the middle of the line. So yeah, I guess it makes sense that, you know, there we go. But if you're in the middle of the square, it's just going to, I guess it's luck of the draw, I guess, right? Anyhow, so there's that. Now I want to show you quickly what I mean about, you know, things being uninterrupted. I'm going to go back into Edge Select. Actually, let me go into Face Select and I want to subdivide the square. All right, so you can see I have a subdivision going on there. I'll go into my vertex mode. I even have an extra vertex breaking up this line. All right, so back into Edge Select. Now I'm going to hit Alt and I'm going to try and select this whole line all the way across. And you can see that it stops right here at this broken face, right? And that's why I said it has to be uninterrupted from one end to the other, just simple quads all the way across. Now, I'm not, like I said, entirely sure on the mechanics behind that. But I know this will goof it up. Like, so if I was to get rid of these lines here, right, get rid of those, I can once again select everything going all the way across. All right. And it would have done the same thing from the other side, select from here to here. All right. So that's something just worth knowing. All right. Now, as far as the other selections that we have left up here, this box here is your select box. So what I'm in right now is just a simple selection, right? Nothing more than just click and select. Moving down one, I have the select box, which means I can drag out a box and select anything I want. This is the mode I tend to use the most. Don't know why, I just do. No specific reason. I like it. Then we have the select circle. This one I like, and it's because for a larger area, you just kind of brush on your selection, which is kind of cool. And then the very last one is you have the lasso, and this is for just doing kind of obscure shapes. Like, you know, if it's usually for smaller areas with a lot of detail, if, you know, you just play around with it, you'll get the idea how that works. Now, with all of these modes, your W key, W as in, oh, I don't know, W, will let you cycle through all of these modes. All right. So now I'm in normal select mode. Next one should be my, my square box thingy there, my drag. I'm not sure what I wanted to call that. What did I want to call that? I guess just my select box. All right. And then the next one is your painting on, and then you got your lasso tool, and then you're back from the beginning, just the normal selection. Now, some of these do have a shortcut just for the mode itself, like C is in Charlie, right? If I hit that, all right, now I'm in my paint mode. Now, I don't know what the other ones are. Sorry about that. You're going to have to look those up. So there are definitely shortcuts to get into those other modes. All right. Now, that's kind of it for the selections, right? So you've got, oh, no, wait, that's not it. Actually, I think there's one more way. That's what I'm telling you. There's like 15 different ways to do the same thing. I believe if I hold Control plus, yep, that's it. So if I select this center square, I hit Control and then the plus sign on my number pad, I can expand outward, right? So I can keep expanding my selection outward, or the minus key, I can select inward. So that's a select more or select less. So you'll see that in your menu option at some point. It'll see select more, select less. That's what that is, right? So Control plus, you know, if you want to pick just a few of them, that's kind of the way to do it. So pretty cool, right? I like it. I think it's kind of neat. Alrighty. So that covers the selections. So what else do we have up here? We went over the gizmo, so we're good with that. Now here, let me bring up, I'm going to start a new object here really quick, and I'm going to go with sphere this time, just because I like spheres and this is kind of cool. Up here in the segments, now when you get into making models, depending on what the model is, you're going to want to be aware of your poly count, right? If it's a high poly model, low poly model, the more geometry that you have in that model, the harder it's going to be on your system, right? It's going to use more system. Just rendering it is going to be, maybe not for one object, it's not going to be so tough, but if you got an extremely detailed high poly model somewhere in your map, and one of them, maybe not such a huge deal, but when you start adding more, you're going to start struggling a little bit, right? So your FPS will drop. You don't want that. You want to keep the lowest poly count that you can and still have it look good. Now, there's several tricks that you can use, right, to try, to have things look good on a very low poly model, and we'll get there. So there's plenty of tricks. A lot of it has to do with texturing. You can base like your textures, whether it's your normal maps and stuff like that, you can base that on a high poly model and apply it to a low poly model, right? And I'll explain it when we get there. It may not make sense now, but trust me, it's gold. All right. So with this, like I said, with the face count, you can see that my segments start at 32. That may be more than what you need, right? So you can get that all the way down to, basically nothing. And what I'm doing there, by the way, is dragging. See how I'm dragging that back and forth? I can drag it up. I can drag it down. 3 is as low as you can go. So you can use, those arrow keys, or you can just drag it. All right. So it was at 32. I've gone as low as say 26, 23. Looks pretty good. And obviously you can type a number in there if you want. All right. So it still looks pretty good. It looks like a good square, a good sphere. You don't need much more than that, really. I'm going to actually drag that up a little bit. Remember G and then Z and get me up there. Okay. We will go over these, the 3D, your 3D marker there, the 3D cursor. We'll go over that at some point too. That's something I don't use a whole lot, but it does come in handy for many different things, especially if you're doing animations. Oh my God, it definitely comes in handy then. All right, so I got my sphere here, and now that I've sidetracked myself about 20 different times, can't even remember what I wanted to do. All right, so like I said, I am in front orthographic mode right now. Right now, remember that these different selections up here, there's also different ways to get into these shadings, right? So here you have the shaded model. Well, this is completely shaded. This is just, the show materials. This is your solid mode and your wireframe mode. Now, my wireframe mode, I have on a shortcut, Shift-Z, and I did that by right-clicking and then assign shortcut. I know in one of my videos, I couldn't figure out how to get something into your quick menu. And some objects can't go into a quick menu, right? And that's what I figured out. And that's one of them. So for the most part, if you find something else, like maybe face orientation, change shortcut right there, add to quick favorites. Okay. So some things can go into your quick favorites, some cannot. Pressing Q is where you find all your quick favorites. I used to have subdivide in there and it's not there anymore. Something happened recently. I'm not sure. I don't know if something reset. All right, so I'm going to get myself over into wireframe mode. There's another way. Okay. Oh, geez. See, like I said, there's much more than one way to get into something. If you press Z on your keyboard, Z for zebra or Z, depending on where you're at, this will get you into your different modes, right? So you can go either hit number 4 for wireframe, or you can just kind of hover over it and select it. So like I said, it depends on what you're more comfortable with. And as you get used to shortcuts, you're going to find out that you're just pounding through keys and stuff is just happening, right? Because, you're getting used to things. Like I said, you want to do other tutorials, look them up, get familiar with the way other people are doing things, and impart on their knowledge, learn from them. Because like I said, A lot of ways not qualified to be doing this. I will show you what I know, which is what, I mean, I'm maybe a little bit beyond basics, but maybe I can get you through the basics end of it. And I can at least get you guys making models and stuff for farm sim, texturing the way they need to be textured, the whole 9 yards. All right. Well, it's getting up into other areas, like as far as sculpting and like more advanced features that not only, that I'm not overly familiar with, but, it'd be a waste of my time to go that far with things. It really would. So anyhow, like I said, right now I'm in wireframe mode. Actually, I'm going to switch back to solid mode for a second because I want to show you as far as selection goes. Now make sure I'm up on my drag box, my select box. If I wanted to select all these faces, now clicking A would be the best way to do it in edit mode, right? Or you can drag it out like this box. Okay, I am in select mode. So there it goes. All right, so dragging out the box, obviously, it looks like it selected them all. But as you spin the sphere, you can see that it did not, right? It only selected half of them, which I guess is good in some respects, depending on what you were looking to select. The way to get around this, depending on the situation, maybe you can't press, A. It depends. Depends what you're working on. What I do is you can go into wireframe mode. Then you can select everything. See, when I go back and I look, everything is selected. Now, where this would come in handy, right? Say being in front orthographic mode, if I'm in wireframe, say I just wanted to select these two, I wanted a hole right through the middle of this, right? So if I go into wireframe mode and I can select these 4 faces right here. Now I'm just going to delete the faces, right? And you can see what happened already. As I spin around, I got a nice square hole perfectly through the center of there. So there are instances where wireframe is going to come in extremely handy. I mean, it's handy enough that I have it on its own shortcut because that's how much it gets used. Like I said, when your models get a little more complicated and you got more going on, trust me, you really, you really use it. All right. So now with all of our faces, our vertexes, our edges, all of that stuff, they are all of them. You can be manipulated in one form or another, right? So if I'm in face select here, I can grab it. I can pull that in different directions. I can rotate the face, and then I could also scale the face, right? You can do the same thing with your edges. If you're in edge select, you can scale an edge, rotate an edge, and you can certainly grab an edge. Your vertexes are the only ones where you do not have that option, right? So if I grab any vertex, I can grab it and move it, right? But you cannot scale it. You cannot rotate it simply because it occupies just a single point in space. All right. So just keep that in mind when we get into manipulating these things. But there's a lot that you can do with it, man. There's a whole lot you can do with it. All right. One of the other things that we did not get into was this right here. And you can see this is our transform pivot point. Now that pivot point is that 3D cursor that I was telling you about. Okay. Now you can see right now the way that what it's pivoting around would actually be what I like to call the my origin point, right? Which would be that little yellow dot. For me, it's green right now, and it's right in the middle of my sphere, right? So that is what I'm actually pivoting around, but that can be moved depending on the circumstance. So when we where you're going to use this the most, I think, is when we bring models into Giants Editor, you can see that when you rotate an object within the editor, that point is attached somewhere. It's usually at the base of the model. Like, so if you're putting down like a stop sign or something, you're working at the very bottom of that sign, not, the top or the middle or anything like that. So that's when you're going to use that the most, but there is a lot of different uses for it. Now, I don't manipulate it a whole lot. I don't move it around. It depends what I'm doing. And as we get there through some of these videos, I will show you. But if you feel like you need a different pivot point, here's another thing, by the way, also shift and right click is going to move your 3D cursor, right? So there, I just moved my 3D cursor over there. It's bound to happen at some point that you hit the wrong keys. You're getting better with things, faster with things, and shoot, you hit the wrong key. Now that thing is hanging out there. You don't like it there. Maybe it's having an undesired effect and you need to get it back, right? And you cannot figure out how to get it back. You're trying to move it through. You have this button up here, right, where you can get into this mode, which lets you move the cursor around. But, you know, without manually putting it back there, you can't quite figure that out, right? So if you go into object mode, you can set origin to 3D cursor, right? So that there's, well, I'm not saying to do that. That's not the way to get it back. But there's different ways to move either your geometry. You can move to the origin, depending on where that's at. You can move your origin to the geometry, origin to the 3D cursor. But anyhow, if you go down a little bit further, you'll see something that says snap. All right. Now, right here, you can take cursor to world origin. All right. And that will get that cursor back where you wanted it, right there at the world origin. Okay. Let me go back in edit mode here. Now, one of the other things too, and I'll try to get this, I just kind of goofed it up on myself. Sometimes when you're trying to zoom in, you can only get so far in. Now, this is something I kind of stumbled on. I have to look it up. Depending on how your model's laid out and depending on where your cursor and your origin and all that stuff is at, you get lost in the mechanics of this one as well, but you can only zoom in so far and it drives you bonkers. If you hit your Alt key, right? So if you have something selected, now, I don't think you necessarily need it selected, but I do. If you hit your Alt and then you just click your middle mouse button, in most cases, it will zoom you in further. It will allow you to zoom in further than you normally would. I have to look up exactly what that function is because I'm sure it's a specific function. And I'm not sure exactly what it is. But I just wanted to put that out there because there are times where you cannot zoom in, where you're stuck far away from something and it's driving you crazy. That's the way to get around it. Press your Alt key, middle mouse button, and it will let you zoom in again. Maybe it resets the view or something. I'm not quite sure. I'll look that up. I probably should have looked it up before I did this video instead of looking like a big dummy, but it is what it is. I'll make it up to you in the next video. I will let you know what that function does. All right. So like I said, with your origin and your 3D cursor, you know, a lot of that's just going to be your pivot point, you know, where things rotate. If you're going to rotate an object, like what does it rotate around, you know? And a lot of times you can see this one is just rotating around, you know, you can see where it's attached. It's attached to my origin point. All right. So if I was to move that origin point somewhere else, obviously I'd be rotating like on a different axis. Up here, you can select how you want that pivot point to work. You know, it's a bounding box. Do you want it to use the 3D cursor for pivoting, right? So if I hit rotate now, you can see that I'm rotating on the 3D cursor instead of on my origin. And right on down the list. Okay. So you can pick, you know, individual origins, median point, active element. So as you play around with these, you'll figure out what does what. Just don't panic if you move your 3D cursor, because I've done that plenty of times in the beginning where I'm like, shoot, I can't get it to go back. And for some reason, I don't know, maybe I thought it was goofing me up. Didn't quite know what was going on there, but it was driving me bonkers. All right. So back to our sphere. All right. I believe that covers most everything. One of the other things I wanted to show you quickly when I was talking about poly count is up here. If you look at this is your viewport overlays up here, right? I'm not sure what the name for this would be. Show overlays. Okay. So all your overlays are in here. I like to bring up statistics a lot because I can see how many objects I have in my scene, vertexes, edges, faces, triangles, the whole 9 yards. Right. And this is when you have something, you want to have it highlighted mostly to be able to tell what's what. So if you have more than one object in here, it's going to give you data on all of that objects. But if you keep it selected, it'll break it down for you. All right. And I like to keep a running tab on how big my models are getting and how out of hand they're getting. There's ways to clean them up, you know, to cut down on your geometry and stuff. And we'll get that, we'll get there. I'll show you how to do all that stuff. But like I said, these are all your overlays. So if there's anything that you want turned on or off or you name it, that can be done, through this overlays button. All right. And then everything else should be pretty much, self-explanatory. Mesh edit modes were, again, if we have a use for some of these, we'll come back to it. But for the most part, I think we covered all of the basics. All right. So as far as manipulating objects, we got into moving things, right? So you know how to move things around. That should be pretty self-explanatory by now. Hopefully you practice that a little bit. I'm sure most of you guys up until this point have been trying to have a go at Blender. So you're probably familiar with at least some of the little things, moving things, extruding and stuff like that. But there's probably a lot of things you didn't know. And I'm counting on that because when we get into extrusion, there's a few things that I want to show you. But anyhow, there's one more thing up there on the toolbar that I want to get into. All right. And that's this button right here. And this is going to be our proportional editing. So I'm going to take this square right here. I'm going to get myself into vertex select. I'm going to select just this very, very center point up there. Okay. And I'm going to put myself in, I'm going to keep myself where I'm at right now. So I'm going to hit G and Z, and I'm going to pull that up on the Z axis. Now you can see how I gave it like a really pointy, just a spike, right? I'm sure it has a use somewhere in your modeling, but that's not necessarily what I want, right? So what this proportional editing does, if I do that again, I'm going to push Z or G and then Z. Now you can see that huge circle that started there. This whole thing is moving. I can use my scroll wheel and I can narrow in on just what I want it to affect, right? So what it's doing is within that circle that you see there, this circle right here, anything within that circle, that's like your circle of influence, I guess you can say. Any faces or depends what mode you're in, faces, vertex, whatever is within there in that circle, this is going to affect it, right? So as I get bigger, I scroll this circle out, it affects more of the object. Okay. So you can see, you can give it a nice irregular shape instead of that big pointy spike that I pulled up out of the middle of there, right? So, you can kind of give it something like so. And depending on what you wanted to do, get yourself over to Edge Select. And then you can use Alt, select just that ring around there. And then use Scale. You can scale that in a little bit, right? If you wanted to give it maybe a different look. Okay, let's go back into Vertex Select. We'll select that vertex right at the top. G, and then, so I want to get myself out of, you got to watch with that mode. You don't want to be in that mode all the time. G and then Z, we'll bring this down flat again. All right. So you can see, if you need a different shape, you can see, how you can get different shapes different ways, right? So there's a lot more ways to do what you want. So, I could actually select all right now just by pressing A, and then we'll rotate this on the Y axis 180 degrees. Like so, and I'll G, Z, and then now I got the makings of a hot air balloon. Okay, so all I gotta do is make a basket for underneath there, give this a fancy design. But anyhow, I wanted to show you what the proportional editing did. And that works for just about anything. So I can select one of the faces in the middle here, right? And I'll turn this on. Now the selections that it gives you here between sphere, root, inverse, square, you're just gonna have to play around with those to get a feel for what each one of these do. For the most part, I'm on just regular smooth, and it seems to work pretty good for me. All right, so you can see if I hit G to move this, to grab it, you can see that big area that it's affecting, right? And as I dial that in, only what's within that circle is what's being affected. All right, and this does come in really, handy. Like I've already made like say fence post, like let's try that. We'll do that a quick example. We'll hit, Shift A to select a new object. I'm going to hit cylinder. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale that. I'm going to hit S for scale, and then I'm going to hit Shift Z because I don't want it to get any bigger. And I'm just kind of bring that in like it is. All right. Front orthographic mode. And I'm going to bring that up a little bit. Actually, I want to move this this balloon here. I want to get that out of. Jeez, I stink at selected stuff today. My goodness. All right, let's start way out here. All right, this isn't going to work. Oh my Lord! You know what I'm trying to do? I'm trying to get this space right in between the two of them, and it's hard to do. All right, what you could do if now here's a good example. If you run into something like that, you can use select with your shift box as well. So you can see I got part of it, but not the rest. So I can hold in shift and I can come back and just, select the rest of that object. All right. There's probably a much easier way to do that, but I like to do things the hard way. All right. And I'm going to hit G, Y. No, it's locked. See, because this is all one object. So it's locked into that cylinder that I made there. A good way to get around this now, if you right click, you can see this separate, right? Separate selection, because that's I have the whole thing selected. So that's what I would want to do. I'd want to separate that selection. All right. Now, what I like to do, because there's a shortcut key for everything, and you can see that the shortcut is P, and then it's going to be S for selection. So, really quickly, PS, and that got my sphere moved, that got me into its own object. Okay. So now I can GY and I can move just that selection out of the way. All right. And then I can go back up to, this says sphere, but the reason it says that is because when I made this object, I was in edit mode and it made it part of the same object. If you wanted two separate objects, it should be done in object mode. I'm guilty of that a lot. I tend to do that when I probably shouldn't be doing it. But anyhow, like I said, if we take an object like I got here, I'm going to scale this just on the Z axis to make it a little bit bigger. All right. And I'm going to, what did I do there? I'm going to move it up just a tiny bit. All right. Doesn't matter that I have that balloon selected. All right. So selecting actually, I'm not even going to select all that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Control R because I want to put some loops in here. Right. And we'll go over this at some point too. But I'm just using this as a demonstration for what I do with this proportional editing. Now, if you could look at this as like a fence post or something like that, right? If I'm in face select, and it doesn't even need to be face select, I can select just a part of this post right here, like say in the middle. And then with proportional editing on, I can G like Y, and you can see how you can add like a bend. That's how I use it. Now you don't want to go too much because that's just a goofy looking post, but a little bit, and you give it a little bit of a radius, a softer touch, you can dial it in, make it sharper, out to make it, but just to make things, well, I don't know what I wanted to say there, but you can see that there is a use for it, between what we did up there in the balloon and, making things just a little out of kilter. You'll figure it out. You'll figure out ways to use that. So like I said, it's not only just, working on the selection, that single selection, it's affecting the faces or vertices around it as well. All right. So just keep that in mind. That should be kind of it. What else did I miss up here? This mirror, I'm not sure. Is that on everybody's? I'm not going to go over mirroring now. But I'm not sure if that's on everybody's viewport or not. That might be part of an add-on for me. And my add-ons, by the way, when I hit my N key, you can see all of these down the right-hand side. Those are mostly add-ons. You probably only have like just a couple of tabs in there. Your Giants i3D exporter is going to be in there at one point. All right. So don't worry about that now. We're going to get into all this. We're going to get into, adding add-ons, working with modifiers, extruding, working with like loop cuts and stuff like that. Like I said, right now we pretty much, that's it. We've covered the basics. All I wanted to do is just go over the like selections, very basic ways that you can modify objects. And like I said, just selecting any one of these faces, you can do, anything you want to do with it. It's up to your imagination. There's no rules. Well, I'm sure there are rules, but there's really nothing telling you how you have to do something, for whatever reason, I don't even know what I wanted to say. But like I said, it's just play around with things. In the next tutorial, it's going to make a little bit more sense because we're going to start getting into extruding objects and stuff like that. And I think that's where a lot of people have a hard time with, like, starting out. You start with a square or a cube. Like, where do you go from there? It's like you just make another cube and shape. That's the biggest, not the biggest hurdle, but that's a hurdle that I think a lot of people need to get over, is they're not quite sure, how they want to start out. And what I'd like to do is avoid the confusion between like all these objects down here on the left-hand side. You can see so far that we really didn't use many of them, right? So I showed you what select did, how to do the cursor. Now your simple move, rotate, scale. Everything else like measure, I'll show you how to measure something if you need to, but there's add cube. We know how to do that. Extrude region, there's a shortcut for that, which we're going to be doing. Inset bevel, I'm going to show you both of those. That's not a problem. Your loop cut and your knife, I'm going to show you shortcuts for both of those. Then when you get down to poly build, spin, smooth, edge slide, I don't use these a whole lot. I'm going to leave that up to you. We'll touch on them possibly, but most of what we're going to be doing is hard surface, even though some of these do have a place in hard surface modeling. Some do, some don't. We're going to, like I said, stick to mostly the basics. Hopefully when you're done here, you'll be able to take what I show you and know enough that when you get into yet another tutorial, you're not completely lost, right? You have all of these basics down pat. Like I said, I hate so far these first 3 videos, the way that I did things, just kind of throwing things at you and just quickly going, but I want to just be semi-familiar. You're like, even when we get into another tutorial, like, oh shoot, you know what? Bauer mentioned something about that. Where is that? I remember him saying something about that. So as long as it rings a bell, that's good because you're at least aware that something exists. So a little bit of searching and you'll be able to find it again. All right. But those were the very basics. You're going to be spending a ton of time moving things around and manipulating them in one form or another, whether you're grabbing an object and pulling on it or extruding it, beveling edges, insetting. That's just basically all it comes down to. There is not much to this. It just takes time, right? You have to put the time into it. And that's kind of it. That's what it comes down to. Alrighty. So let me think really quick before I let you go. Is there anything that we may have missed basic wise? I kind of don't think so. Practice making shapes, bringing shapes into your scene. Like I said, don't do what I do. Like I don't know why it's a bad habit that, I like to select an object and then just delete all faces, but that object doesn't always go away. And then you got to watch because you're in face mode. Well, I was in edge mode there. But sometimes it left vertexes behind that you don't see because you're in face mode. So try not to do that. If you're going to delete an object, delete it the right way and just go into object mode and delete the whole object. I mean, you can see here that it says sphere 1 is somewhere in here, but there is no sphere, right? So part of that is probably hanging out somewhere. So just delete the whole object, do it the right way. Also be conscious, be wary of when you bring new objects in, what mode you're in, right? If you're in edit mode, it's going to make it part of the whatever object you currently have selected. Okay. If you want it to be an object on its own, you have to bring that in object mode. All right. And these are little things. Like I said, enough time and it'll start sinking in, right? It's not that big of a deal. It's really not. All right. So what we can look forward to with the next video, I think we're going to start to get into extrusion, like extruding objects and show you how extrude works. It's very simple. I'm sure you all know how to do it. But this is where I'll start showing you some things that I'm sure you probably didn't know. All right. And it's going to be fun. It'll be interesting. Right. So, I'm going to wrap it up right there because we're coming up on 40 minutes and I don't want to, beat a dead horse with these things. But anyhow, like I said, I'm going to leave it there. And with that being said, I'm Bauer Brown and I will see you on the next one.